A haunted aftermath, Pearl Harbor's shadow. The morning sun drew long, accusing lines across twisted metal and scorched concrete at Pearl Harbor. Lieutenant Commander Joseph Rochefort hunched over a desk buried in towers of intercepted Japanese messages, his uniform wrinkled, eyes bloodshot from nights without sleep. The basement cryptanalysis center smelled of stale coffee and cigarette smoke, and outside, the Pacific Fleet existed as a ghost. 4 battleships on the harbor bottom, hundreds of aircraft destroyed, and more than 2,000 Americans dead. The Japanese strike had been precise and brutal, but Rochefort felt something different. Not defeat, but a growing pattern in the enemy's radio traffic that suggested the tide could still turn. The small revolution of code breaking. Code breaking was no longer a fringe craft to be ignored. Rochefort and his team of analysts worked beside clattering IBM tabulators, sifting endless code groups for meaning. Weeks of careful watching had produced fragments that, when stitched together, hinted at an enormous upcoming operation. One intercept mentioned Operation MI and repeatedly noted the cryptic designation AF. Every mention was a small clue, and for Rochefort, those clues began to form a map, not of ships and men, but of intent.
A risky, brilliant idea. When Lieutenant Commander Jasper Holmes proposed setting a deliberate trap, a plain-language message from Midway complaining of a water distillation failure, Rochefort seized it. If the Japanese picked up the fake distress and referenced water supplies for AF, Midway would be exposed as the target. It was an audacious bit of deception, plant a vulnerability, let the enemy confirm it, and then use their own communications against them. The moment the Japanese intelligence traffic referenced water shortages at AF, Rochefort's weary face lit with conviction. Midway it was. Nimitz's calm at the storm's center. Admiral Chester Nimitz stood in his headquarters watching salvage crews. He had taken command of the Pacific Fleet in its darkest hour and had learned the hard lesson that information mattered as much as hardware. When Commander Edwin Layton delivered Rochefort's assessment that an enormous Japanese operation would strike in early June and likely target Midway, Nimitz did not panic. He did what seasoned commanders do under pressure. He weighed the intelligence and accepted risk. If the intercepts were right, the U.S. had a rare advantage: foreknowledge. The human cost of doing the impossible. Orders flowed down and thousands answered in metal and muscle. Yorktown's deck, ripped open from Coral Sea battle damage, should have taken months to fix. Workers compressed that work into 72 visionary hours. Shipfitters welded, electricians rerouted lines, and crews labored until collapse, driven by the sense that each rivet might save lives. The shipyards became a scene of pure will, men and women turning back the clock on time and damage to produce a carrier that could join the coming fight. Pilots, planes, and new tactics. Across briefing rooms and hangars, tactics changed to meet the enemy. Lieutenant Commander John Thach taught pilots a new defensive method, the weave, that would blunt the Zero's superior maneuverability. Fight as pairs, cover each other, and avoid needless one-on-one turning duels. The U.S. fighters, robust wildcats, would not match Zero's blow for blow in aerobatics, but they could absorb damage and win where discipline and doctrine held. Young pilots like Ensign George Gay listened, nervous but determined, understanding that training and formation could outrank raw performance. Midway's ragtag defenders. At Midway, the garrison was a study in improvisation. Marine Colonel Harold Shannon inspected an assortment of aircraft that read like a stopgap: obsolete Brewster Buffaloes, more capable Wildcats, and a handful of assorted bombers. Pilots were green, machines were mismatched, and resources were thin. Yet Shannon's order was unambiguous: delay the enemy at any cost. The island's role was simple and brutal: survive long enough for the Navy's carriers to find and strike the Japanese fleet.
The day the sea lit up. As June approached, search patterns extended from Midway's PBY Catalinas, and the tension mounted to a sharp edge. Early on June 3rd, a PBY sighting set the gears turning. Japanese ships on the horizon, carriers hidden, and the trap closed. On the morning of June 4th, radar at Midway called out the incoming force, and the island's defenders scrambled. Torches of anti-aircraft fire lit the dawn as Marine and Army pilots launched into the brutal choreography of defense. The initial American strikes were piecemeal and costly, and many aircraft fell in a vision of swirling smoke and wreckage. But their sacrifices bought vital time. Nagumo's dilemma and a fatal delay. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo faced a fateful decision aboard his carriers: rearm aircraft for a second strike on Midway's runways, or keep planes armed for naval targets in case American carriers appeared. Nagumo chose to rearm for the land attack, a slow and hazardous process of removing torpedoes and replacing them with bombs on crowded hangar decks. That decision left his air groups temporarily vulnerable. Armament moved, fuel exposed, and readiness compromised, just as American carrier planes were launching everything they had.
Admiral King's command structure and preparations. King created the South Pacific Command under Vice Admiral Robert L. Gormley and appointed Rear Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner to organize amphibious operations. Even before Midway's outcome was known, Turner and Marine General Holland M. Smith began developing island-hopping techniques. The plan envisioned 4 phases: hold the defensive line, seize the Solomons and Bismarck Archipelago, capture the Marshalls and Carolines, then advance toward the Philippines or Dutch East Indies. King approved and ordered Gormley to take charge in June 1942. Gathering storm over Guadalcanal. Intelligence soon identified Guadalcanal as the next Japanese target. Reconnaissance in late May revealed construction of an airfield there, later confirmed by Australian coast watchers and U.S. codebreakers. Yamamoto ordered the 11th and 13th construction units to complete the airfield by early July. Recognizing the danger of a Japanese base threatening Allied routes to Australia, Nimitz and King decided to strike first. Admiral Turner began assembling and training an amphibious task force at Wellington, New Zealand, with only 1 month to prepare. Challenges and conflicting commanders. Vice Admiral Gormley, traveling to meet MacArthur in Melbourne, doubted the plan's feasibility. Both commanders believed the operation under-resourced and pleaded for postponement, but King refused. The invasion would proceed in early August. Supplies were hastily loaded in disarray, and intelligence on Japanese defenses remained vague. On July 28th, Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, commanding carrier forces, convened a planning meeting aboard USS